Hi guys and welcome to a deck tech video for Golos Turns. Now before we get into this video I would like to say that this is probably not the strongest cEDH deck you could build. I think this deck is running around somewhere around casual competitive or semi-competitive power level. But there is one thing I really like about this deck, and that's how much it is on an autopilot. You don't really need to think that much when you're playing this deck, you just need to do. Compared to other cEDH decks, you really need to think a lot about your decision making. In this deck you basically cast Golos, activate Golos, and you play the cards Golos flips into. That's basically it. Therefore, I think this is a good entry deck for a beginner. Alright, it's not gonna be on a budget, but if you are a cEDH player yourself and you basically already have the deck and you wanna introduce the format to new players, this is a deck you could assemble and lend out to your friends so they could basically try out the format and see what they think about it. I mean, you can't lend out the 4 Horsemen Gitrog monster without having a 30-minute educational talk about how this deck actually functions. The Golos Turns deck is a commander-orientated stacks deck. The game plan is super simple. Cast Golos ASAP using some various ramp cards to get the big Robo in play, then activate the big Robo and flip into turn spells to keep on going and some stacks cards to lock down the game. However, sometimes you might have to go forward a little bit slower, like a turn 1 Bird of Paradise, followed up with a turn 2 Narset Parter of Veils to basically slow down the game for everyone but you. That means that if we activate Golos and we don't hit an extra turn spell, we might flip into some stacks cards and maybe even a land drop, and then we can pass turn, and because we found some stacks cards, our opponents are gonna have a harder time winning the game, and we can prolong the game and get some more mana into play to eventually hit some extra turn spell with Golos. And let's actually take a look at this Chains of Mystophilis. So if a player would draw a card, except the first one he or she draws on his or her draw step, that player discards a card instead. So if you're gonna draw a card, you have to discard a card first. If a player discards a card this way, he or she draws a card. If a player doesn't discard a card this way, he or she puts the top card of his or her library into his or her grave. So if opponent is hellbent and they are trying to draw a card except the first card they draw each turn, they're basically going to mill themselves for 1. If they already have cards in their hand and they want to draw cards, they are forced to discard cards first. The cool thing about Golos is that we are not drawing cards on the Golos activation. This is card drawing production, but it's not actually card draw. So we are actually breaking parity against Chains of Mystophilis. In other words, you could summarize the entire deck with this. This deck contains 3 different things. Number 1, ramp cards like Elves of Deep Shadow. Number 2, stacks cards like Hushbringer. Number 3, extra turn spells. This deck also contains a Dockside Extortionist because that card is amazing and a great ramp card to get your commander out in play faster. Also the Emil the Blessed, because with Emil and Dockside and 4 treasures from each of your opponent, you're going infinite mana, and with infinite mana you have the win with Golos. And also, both of these 2 cards are individually good on their own. You don't have to have both in play to make it functional. For example, Emil the Blessed could flicker Golos, and on the ETB effect you gain a land. So that's 3 mana, put a land into play, tap. That is pretty decent. It's okay. And the Emil the Blessed is still a good combo piece to get with Dockside. Now we are actually playing Hushbringer inside this deck, and that is because we are not heavily dependent on this strategy compared to other decks being a little bit more dependent on that strategy. Hushbringer currently shuts down Faz's Oracle, other opponents' Docksides, and other things. Now you could actually tweak this and remove Hushbringer from your deck if you feel that that's better for your metagame, because this is a stacks deck, and that means it's something of a meta deck, and it has to be adapted towards your own playgroup and what you're usually going up against. So when I was sitting home and thinking about what stacks I should go for to interact with the majority of my playgroup, I came to a conclusion I would go for anti-lands, anti-color fixing, so Magus of the Moon, Blood Moon and back to basic, but also the most epic thing in the entire world, Destructive Flow. You might already know what these three does, but Destructive Flow, at the beginning of each player's upkeep, that player sacrifice a non-basic land. So yes, you are currently looking at a 5-colored deck that only contains basic lands. Alright, that isn't actually true. I actually have all the 10 fetch lands, and after that I even have the Fable Passage and Prismatic Vista. And on the Golos ETB I usually find Fable Passage. After that I have 2 islands, I have 2 snow-covered mountains, 2 snow-covered plains, and 2 snow-covered swamps. And then I have 8 snow-covered forests. And the reason why I'm going for so many forests is because with forest I will have my color fixing. I have my Bird of Paradise, I will have my Utopia Sprawl, and I will have my Restore. And let's actually talk about this All-Star Restore. When you get Fellower's Stone or an Arcane Signet, this comes into play untapped and you can activate it immediately. With this, you can return one of your fetch lands from your graveyard, so you crack this for a basic forest, then you use this to return this and crack it for an island, so this is perfectly mana fixing for you, but also bringing the land into play untapped. Another All-Star in a heavily snow-covered deck is Arkham's Astrolabe. For only 1 snow-covered mana, then you draw a card, which is great. You can tap 1 mana, tap this to add a mana of any color to your mana pool. So this is perfect color fixing for you. But another amazing thing about Golos when it comes to Magus of the Moon effect is that it only demands 5 colorless mana to cast it. So you aren't actually affected by this when you want to hard cast this thing. And when you resolve this on the ETB effect, you basically color fix, because you're gonna find a land. So if you have this in play, just find a basic land and you're probably fine after that. Let's talk a little bit more about the interaction for this deck and counter spells. So counter spells doesn't really fit inside this deck, because if you flip into counter spells with Golos, they don't do anything, and then you pause turn and you're tapped out, and that's bad. If you activate Golos and you flip into some spot removal like Force of Vigor or Abrupt Decay, that is great because you can cast them from the Golos effect, and if you have them in your hand, you can also cast them. So if you don't really know what you're going to include inside this deck, I would suggest if you fill the deck with interaction like Spot Removal, Force of Vigor, and Abrupt Decay instead. And Glen Alendra is a good inclusion, because that is a card you could flip into with Golos during your main phase, pass the turn. If you have blue mana at the ready, you can sacrifice her and interact during your opponent's turn, like if you had counter spells. Another great idea is to always go for stacks effects that are always going to interact with your opponents. For example, Aven Mind Sensor is anti-search, Stranglehold is anti-search, this is only for your opponents by the way, and the Notion Thief is anti-card draw. These 2 effects, search and card draw, are universal for all cEDH decks, so these 3 cards are always going to be effective against your opponents. Also, this got flash and this got flash, so you could actually cast them in instant speed and pretend that you have counter spells. But how does this deck actually win the game? It's quite simple. Nexus of Fate and also Beacon of Tomorrow, when these cards resolve or this can actually be counterspelled, it will still trigger, they're going back into your deck, and when your deck is completely gone, only containing Nexus of Fate and Beacon of Tomorrow, you have infinite turns. And to get there, we basically have a lot of different extra turn effects that are helping you get there. I would also like to talk about Mind's Desire and Dramatic Reversal. I actually have this inside my deck without having Isochron Scepter in it as well. I guess you could include Isochron Scepter, but I don't think you should. You could, but this is basically an extra turn spell as well, because it's going to untap so many non-land permanents that you're gonna get a secondary Golos activation that turn. It's the same thing with the Mind's Desire. You should build a really high storm count, then you cast this and you flip into some more cards. This is basically the same thing as Golos, and you could hit some extra turn spells to keep on going forward with your deck. However, this deck would go into the category of too big to fail, and this is the big reason why this deck is somewhere around the lower power level, because sometimes this happens. Casting Walk of Aeons, an extra turn. I'm not sacrificing free islands.
I have a response. Finally, deflecting spots.
Oh no. Ah! I knew it. I knew it. But there's also this card, Narset Reversal. Imagine someone casting that into your Expropriate. Still, even though this is running around on the lower power level, I think this is a really fun deck. You get to play some really cool cards, and if you like playing some casino, flipping the top card of your library and seeing what happens, then I think this might be a deck for you. Thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoyed the video. And if you like the content on this channel in general, you might be happy to hear that I'm soon starting to reach the mark of 15,000 followers, and when I reach that mark, I'm gonna do a Q&A and live stream it on my Twitch TV. In the description below of the video, you can see a link to my Twitch TV account, and you're welcome to attend on that live stream and ask questions on it directly. Also, I'm going to edit that live stream and upload the video here on YouTube so you can watch it later if you can't attend. Also, if you have any questions to me, feel free to leave a comment below in this video where you ask that question. I will try to answer it on the live stream. Also, I have a Discord channel, and on that Discord channel there's a text channel by the name of Q&A 15K, and feel free to leave any questions at that place as well.